Hello, it's an honor to be here. I feel really grateful of the invitation from Tribute Earth to come and share the perspective that can free water from human confusion. Because nowadays, family, we are really confused about water because we perceive it fragmented because of being taught the hydrological map in the school. We've been taught rivers, seas, ocean, all a part of each other, when water is an entire substance that moves, and even if it has 4 states, it's the same substance. There is no rivers, seas, and oceans. There is no rain a part of the cloud. There's no water a part of water, because we are all immersed in it. There is just one big drop of water, and even if it has different states like ether, liquid, ice, it's the same substance, and we are all inside of her. So the priority is to identify the perceptive error of separation and to start teaching water in schools, unified as it is, and ask the kids to help the adults to recover sanity and recover health by recovering realistic perception of water unified, and basically change all that we do and create content and ask artists to create visual content to identify water unified, to erase the confusion that created the hydrological map that we learned, and ask corporations to implement the devices already invented that can purify water using vibrational frequencies or shapes like the imploder that can recover the fractal structure of water and purity. That's the priority. So we need to create new policies, content, graphics, educational programs, everything needed, and use mass media to distribute this information, to spread the word about water unified, for humans to remember how sacred is the substance that creates life on Earth, because we are the only planet that has this substance on top of it. That's why we are here, and we are all inside of it. So it's time to ask everyone to recover realistic perception of water unified, and ask the scientists how to understand better the unified paradigm that describes that everything is created by vibrational frequencies, so we can use devices to restructure purity and fractality in the substance we are immersed in. It's time for that, because if we want to be healthy, we need a healthy environment. And as we are immersed in water, water purification and restoration is the absolute priority. Thank you so much.
Welcome to We Are Water, We Are One, Water and Regenerative Cultures panel. The objective of this panel is to bring the consciousness of non-separation while working with water as the unifier, and how we have the capacity to design and organize societies to protect, enhance, and celebrate life. We have the pleasure to have amazing experts with us to discuss and share insights and solutions. We have Len Edney, Ethan Bloom, Karuna Warren, and Jamaica Stevens. Very, very welcome. Our first panelist is Ethan Bloom. Ethan has been working in resonant frequency technology, and he's a specialist in these technologies, and he's the CEO of Nanoresonance Industries, representing over 20 years municipal water and environmental projects that replace harmful chemicals with a physics process. With your experience, Ethan, what new scientific methods do we have to clean and restore waters?
Thank you for the question. Your answer is yes. Technologies have been in application for well over 20 to 30 years. And before I get into that, I'm actually going to touch on something else, which is the privatization of water. Water is not a mineral. that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and for some reason the textbooks keep it there. But water, even on the periodic table and in all science around the world, water is an element. It's the largest element in the universe, and we on planet Earth are mostly all comprised of water. So how do you privatize water? You can't. It's privatizing life. It's like saying I'm going to privatize the sun. And one more thing, with getting into water is its structure. Water is amazing. It's a crystalline lattice matrix capable of carrying, transceiving, and storing information. And that matrix, the context of the structure of water completely depends on the technologies applied to it. And this is what we really have backwards, because we're old industry over new innovation nowadays, and we're really in a post-industrial revolution mindset in psychology when it comes to technology. For over 20 years, we've applied frequency and physics to restore and remediate riverways and environmental projects successfully without affecting the biological life. We've been able to retrofit water plants and create non-chemical water treatment plants for disaster areas, and creating sewage plants that use frequency and inductance instead of harmful chemicals that end up going, to your faucet. And we've substituted the chemicals with frequency and cooling towers and boilers and large industrial infrastructure projects. So the technology's out there, and it's proven. And the same thing with even fuels. You can stretch the 18 hydrocarbon chain and get a higher burn and better capacity and efficiency. And so these applications actually leverage the efficiency of technologies across the board. We just have to understand what resonant frequency is and its optimum application. I mean, it's grandiose potential with agriculture as well. So the natural bond angles of water is 104.6 or 3 degrees actually. And if you change the angles of impedance or the electron orbits past that 104 degrees, and not expelling them like you do in ionization, but just readjust the organization of that, the water molecule, you can actually instill energy, a frequency wavelength, and you can also get targeted results depending on the other joint applications you're putting together with water, whether it's polarity separation or vortex, different temperatures, pressure. But modern day physics is advanced enough for us to actually create alternative solutions, as we have been. And the greatest issue that we have today is actually a huge lack of responsibility and oversight. And what I mean by that is, for example, the world's oceans. No one looks at the world's oceans. It's unregulated, and you have more destruction of the oceans, which produces 70% of the world's oxygen. It all comes from the ocean and the phytoplankton, which feed after the whales, which are dying off because Navy sonar. You have irresponsible people that are given tons of money without technological oversight, like Elon Musk. This guy, we could talk about lithium mining and batteries and whether the car is beneficial toward, but what we really need to look at is long-term effects on his Starlink program. Okay, 1,200 satellites. Okay, what's the long-term biological effect of life when we start beaming down radiation to this planet? Same in 3, 4, 5G, so forth. We're getting inundated by electromagnetism and frequency. All animals on this planet have magnetite. Bees, lobsters, fish, insects, plants. They all communicate through bioresonance. It's electromagnetic wavelengths. We have we have magnetosomes in our cells, and the human body is all ferromagnetic. The biological cycle of health in all animals Whether talking about magnetite in the brain, magnetosomes in the body, bees have cryptochrome cells behind their ocular nerves. They see the geomagnetic wavelengths of the planet. And the majority of health and what goes on around the earth is really overlooked. And water is the number one conduit of all life. And it has the greatest misunderstanding and the greatest disrespect, because we are all water, we are nature. And until we realize that and come together as a species, we're not separate from nature. We are one with nature. And nature provides an amazing textbook of how we can apply technologies in harmony with nature and benefit through that as caretakers of our planet and of humanity and of all species and life on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Our second panelist of today is Glenn Etney. So Glenn is an ocean ecologist, underwater naturalist, photographer, professional diver, and sailor. His ongoing research is focused on understanding the ocean as a living being and the role she plays as the primary life support system for our planet, including the role of the planetary water cycle in climate regulation. He's the author of 3 books and numerous articles and papers on ocean-related topics, including The Ocean is Alive, Revisioning Our Relationship with the Living Ocean. Glenn, as an expert working with the ocean and indigenous communities, could you share with us a little bit more about your work and why it is vital to relate to the ocean as a living organism?
Okay, kia ora, everyone. Thanks very much. So the first thing to say really is that there is one body of water. And so our planetary body of water includes all of biology. So, you know, we're all water beings, 99% of the molecules. So in some ways we can think of the water cycle. Some people like to think of the different pools of this one body of water, and this is quite a nice way of thinking about it. So the ocean is the largest pool of water. It's really nice to have some context to that, because it's so vast. When we go to the ocean, we're on the shore and we look out to the horizon, and if we're in a bit of elevation, we can actually start to see that horizon curve. And so it's so vast. 1.33 billion cubic kilometers of water, which is meaningless actually for most of us. But if we consider that 1 cubic kilometer of water is the equivalent of 400,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, it's going to give us some idea. So this is a very large body of water. The human connection with this large body of water, with the ocean, has been with us more or less from the start of our species. You know, probably up to 200,000 years ago, the first modern humans viewed the ocean for the first time. And imagine what that was like when you look out to the horizon and the horizon is beyond any of the limits you had previously set for yourself. So this is an important concept in understanding the human relationship to the ocean and also to water. So in my part of the world, where I live in the South Pacific, the peoples of the South Pacific have been voyaging on the ocean longer than anybody else, longer than any other humans, making voyages beyond the near shore, beyond sight of land. And the South Pacific is vast. There are thousands of kilometers between islands. Now, for us moderns, we've grown up with the idea that the ocean separates us, But for the Polynesians and for the ancestors of the Polynesians, the first voyages, oceanic voyages, the ocean wasn't something that separated. The ocean was the connector. And therein lies our very first important clue of where we are right now, the reality of where we are. Ocean is the connector, water is the connector. And so developing a worldview where the water is your connector immediately removes the idea of separation of anything. You are embedded within the water body. And so for all of the indigenous cultures that relate to the ocean, this is exactly the relationship, the one of non-separation. So that's great. What about fresh water? And I guess this is where my work is really focused, is in really helping people understand that there's actually no such thing as the separate body of water called the ocean, and then these separate bodies of water that we like to call fresh water, or sweet water, or pure water. Now, they're one and the same thing. And the understanding of the planetary water cycle, the hydrological cycle, unfortunately, in modern terms, in modern day everyday life, we have pulled apart the water cycle, both physically with our activities, but also metaphorically. We've moved the water cycle into these separate things. And so, for instance, here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have many issues with our waterways, our rivers and lakes. We have 3 of the most polluted rivers in terms of nitrate flux, nitrogen flux. 3 of the most polluted rivers in the world because of agriculture. So we've got this fragmented idea of the water cycle. But in fact, the water cycle is on a universal scale. Water has been around since about 1 billion years after the formation of the universe, after the Big Bang. 1 billion years, the water molecule was one of the first stable molecules in the entire universe. Is basically the conservation of energy, and water is the great conductor, and the conductor of energy, the holder of energy, the facilitator of the flow of energy. And so from a thermodynamic point of view, water is the ideal conduit for the conservation of energy, as well as increasing entropy. So our planetary system, facilitated by the water cycle, is a system in complete disequilibrium. Our neighbours, Mars and Venus, are in complete equilibrium, in other words, dead, to all intents and purposes. But our water cycle, the fact that we have this living water cycle, means that we can stay in the state of disequilibrium. Now, all of the ancestors have actually had this understanding all along. And so water has been revered as the flow of life, the facilitator, the birth of life. So the ocean's part in this obviously is massive, because it's such a massive body of water. The ocean supplies the vast majority of water evaporation. But can I just tell you a quick little story about this, and just to relate it to the living nature of the water cycle. Water evaporation can happen because we get the beautiful radiant energy from our sun. That's certainly the energy supply. But if that was all there was to this evaporation story, we would have had runaway global heating through unstoppable greenhouse effect because of all of the water vapor. So we need something to moderate that, something to give body to that, and that is life. So plankton at the surface of the ocean release a gas called dimethyl sulfide. And when that mixes with the other gas that the phytoplankton have released as a byproduct of photosynthesis, which is the oxygen that we're all breathing now, when those two mix together, they create sulfate particles. Now, the sulfate particles are just about the favorite thing that water molecules love to gather around in the atmosphere. And so these nucleating agents, these sulfate particles, provide the means by which the clouds can form. Above the rainforests of the world, a very similar thing is happening. And who's providing those nucleating agents? The trees are. And all the other green beings of the planet are providing those. So this water cycle is a living water cycle. We participate. So we are the, our role is to provide the carbon dioxide, to metabolize the water, to metabolize all of the other nutrients, because we must remember that the water cycle is the facilitator of all of the other nutrient cycles. But the water cycle needs those other nutrient cycles to be functioning in a healthy way, so that all of biology can maintain the water cycle. So this is the deep ancestral understanding. With our modern science, particularly the science of ecology, we can start to see the larger big picture of all of that. And that's where we are now. So in terms of where we go from here, first of all, we must remember where we belong, and get rid of the idea that we're separate from all of this. And this is the exciting time that we're in now, because we are remembering. We're remembering ourselves, and now we go forward back into this beautiful relationship.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for this beautiful explanation and reminding to us that we are living in a living water cycle, and reminding and working in studying to demonstrate what our ancestors they were explaining to us. And this is a beautiful moment that more science is like arriving to understand everything like that our elders they were teaching us. So thank you very much for your work and all the studies that you are doing. So our next panelist, I want to introduce our next panelist of today. His name is Karuna Warren. So Karuna is a water engineer with 20 years of experience and founder of Water Now organization. He is passionate about holistic water systems, global travel, unification, green technologies, social and environmental action, indigenous and First Nations issues. So Karuna, with your experience working with indigenous communities and water, providing clean water solutions in remote areas, what are the main issues that the communities are facing and possible solutions, and what is the message that they are transmitting to us?
Thank you. And thank you to the other panelists that have spoken. That was a beautiful remembrance, and I gained a lot of, I feel, transmissions just from listening. So thank you for that. Yes, beautiful. To jump right into the questions, the main issues that I believe a lot of Indigenous and First Nations communities are facing with the water right now really has to do with the earth has come out of balance with the overall kind of global water cycle, as Glenn was saying. And one of the reasons why this has happened, I think, is a hyper kind of capitalistic society in many ways that has put economic and certain growth above, keeping natural habitats in place. And the reality today is that many indigenous communities are on the front lines of saving or helping to protect the earth right now and helping to keep our waters protected. And, starting my first project with Water Now about 5 years ago, when I left corporate America, My first project was in Standing Rock, South Dakota, North Dakota, and with the Navajo Dene nations, you know. And I became involved as an activist because right away, one thing I saw was that they were pushing a huge pipeline, you know, through these communities, and it was going through sacred grounds. It had polluted many waters before, and you know, it's for oil. And when you look at this, fossil fuel is really something that plays a part in overall pollution for many reasons. And the indigenous communities are struggling to keep their infrastructures in place and be able to keep their clean water habitats. So what we did for in South Dakota, we went there and we were able to donate water filters because they were getting shipped in large amounts of plastic water bottles there. And really in remote areas, what you have also is a challenge sometimes of if the existing water sources are contaminated or polluted by either industrial action or by some other means, like in the Navajo Nation, it was really polluted by mining. You know, mining was one of the biggest ways that's really damaged the water. So that the last time we tested it, there was high levels of uranium, high levels of this kind of other content. And you combine that with drought that's happened in several areas of the states, for example, like New Mexico and Arizona. Those are the real solid issues that are facing a lot of First Nations communities. In regards to some of the recent projects I've done, which have been in the Amazon, specifically in Colombia, Brazil, and Peru, there's also a similar thing there. And what we see again is that there's you know, the phenomena of water damming. And for example, in Brazil, what happens is if you dam large amounts of water, yes, you can use it for hydroelectric energy, but also you're displacing a large amount of critical habitat species there, and possibly you're possibly displacing water bodies and changing the flow of how these waters flowed. And you know, when I was with the Hunikuin in Brazil, one main thing we saw when we tested the water again was that there's a lot of oils and different kind of things in the water, and that a lot of the industrial output from big cities is making its way to that. So, you know, in essence, what you have is a rather involved socioeconomic political situation that's affecting these indigenous and First Nation communities. For example, in the remote villages of Brazil, the only way to get there right now is by a boat. And in the boat, you have to put gas in and fuel in, and then it contaminates the Amazon River. And then you also have a large amount of logging and deforestation that's increasing every year, cutting down the forest. And of course, this affects the soils. This affects how the ecosystem is balancing itself. It affects the rainfall. And so there's many different factors now. And I think that going back to looking at water as a whole, it's really time for the world to kind of wake up to realizing that nothing is nothing is separate from each other. So if a big city is putting off all these contaminants and all of these things are happening, of course it's going to affect, you know, every village that's eventually around the world. And the last example I have of the issues are we're working with the East African Women's Water Coalition, and they have several indigenous communities in Kenya, Egypt, and Tanzania. And 80% of these women and children and people in the village, they get their water from Lake Victoria. Well, unfortunately, Lake Victoria now is completely contaminated with hyacinth, industrial solvents, and many other things that they can't carry the water from one place anymore, because if they do, they'll get natural airborne diseases and other kinds of contaminants that are in the water. So, you know, to move right into solutions, because I think a lot of the issues and challenges that are on the plate, we like to identify them, but we don't want to get stuck in the problem either, where that you start blaming, because I think we're really at a time globally and as people where we can identify a problem and then as efficiently as possible move into a solution, so you don't get stuck into a blame game and a very polarizing situation of who's at fault, because we realize that now is a time of great action is needed, I feel. So what I believe Ethan was mentioning in his is some of the scientific, solutions are out there. And like we always, one of the native wisdoms that I really learned from these communities was that for every problem, which mostly they're all man-made, there's also a solution that's out there. You know, there's never a problem in itself that can be fixed, because we're made in a world so that there's an infinite way of looking at these things. And water regeneration really becomes the solution to help regenerate these cultures, because when I was talking to an elder in the Hunikuin Brazilian tribe, he says, you know, 80% of all of our issues that we have in our tribes, it's all related to water. It's all related to water because it's such a central part of their community. So they pray with it, they wash with it, they cook with it, they bathe with it, they swim in it. And, you know, it's their everyday life source for them to survive. So one of the things we started doing was regenerating existing water sources through clean energy, through green energy. And specifically what we've done is, for example, with the Turuaka River that's in the Amazon basin, what we've done is we've set up a solar pump panel system, and we pump the water from a station outside of the river to a holding tank. We want to start using hempcrete for water storage, but we're using what's readily available now, which pretty much these large 10,000 liter storage tanks. And then from there, using the solar pumps and a solar panel, which is about as regenerative as you can get right now with electricity, then what we're doing is putting the water through a simple 2-stage water filtration system. This gets out a lot of the contaminants in there. And then right now what we're doing, because the accepted technology is more or less either using a UV filter, which removes 99.99% of pathogens, and or ozone treatment. And what we're really moving to in the new paradigm is water restructuring. And as was mentioned is that by totally changing the structure of water, what you can do is, the similar analogy is like, for example, diamonds and coals having a similar chemical background and physical background, but they're structurally different. So right now, because people are getting dangerously ill and sick, what we're doing is we're adding the restructuring filter as sort of a second or third step of the process. So put the UV so they make sure that their kids aren't getting healthy and sick anymore, and then we restructure the water. And just to give you an example of why we've come out of touch with the water cycle is that, you know, I studied engineering for a lot of years, water engineering. And, you know, in our college universities, they tell you to design everything in right angles and to put 90-degree right angle here, right angle there. And what you're doing is you're just completely de-energizing the water, you know, and on top of it, then you put added chemicals in it, chlorine, fluorides, an assortment of metals and different things that, you know, no water ever really is dead if it's still in the water form, but it loses a tremendous amount of its energy. And through a lot of experiments like Dr. Emoto's and other ones, what we've realized is that water's natural state is always flowing and it's always going in curves, you know. So just by redoing these spiral and these double vortex and hexagonal features, what it does is it's completely giving the water its memory back. It remembers how it was millions or even billions of years ago in this happy, pure, flowing, free state before it was subjected to all of these things that were basically forced into it or onto it. So that's what we're looking at right now as a solution. We've also set up rainwater catchment systems, because as far as the natural water cycles go, rainwater catchment is one of the easiest ways to work harmoniously with the water cycle, because it's always raining in these places like the Amazon. Yet if the water goes into just the river, then it's joining a polluted source. And if it's going and leaching into the ground, it's not usually being utilized in that way or recharging the aquifers. So what we've done is we set up intricate rainwater catchment systems, and then they can use that water directly. And, you know, you can get a lot of yield out of rainwater catchment. And I think it's going to be one of the big solutions that's coming up here in our days, months, and years to come, because it's really a way to exemplify and capture the water and then be able to reuse it. And so it's also a solution for gray water recycling and things like this, so that we stop wasting as much water as a community and as a civilization. And in terms of the actual messages that I've gotten from there, you know, they're really filled with gratitude. And you know, their main messages to me have been to never give up hope, because like in Brazil, they always say soy alegria, you know, and they might be facing a disaster, but they come with a feeling of gratitude for the water, for our global community, for our global tribe, and innate wisdom that we are all connected through water and through the elements. And that's how a lot of the native indigenous communities have, you know, still survived to this point today, is realizing there is sacred oneness through spirit, through source, through the nature, you know, realizing that everything such as water is a living organism. And so that's the message I like to impart today from my travels with the indigenous communities. Yeah, thank you. So.
Thank you, Karuna. Very beautiful. And we're going to keep weaving the world. And I want to introduce our last panelist, that she is Jamaica Stevens. Jamaica is an experienced event producer, workshop leader, group facilitator, educational program designer, community organizer, project manager, and storyteller. Along with her role as community manager for Communities Zone, she's a steward and consultant with Village Lab, regional coordination for the GEN North America, and author and curator of the multimedia project Re-inhabiting the Village, Co-creating Our Future. Jamaica, with this amazing background, working with communities and educational programs, could you share a little bit more about your experience bringing earth-based wisdom to Western organizational systems?
Thank you, Javier. It's so wonderful to hear. I just also want to acknowledge the other panelists. This is such a rich conversation, and I feel a great honor to be here with you, sharing this dialogue today. So thank you for the Tribute Earth organizing us into this conversation. There's so many inroads to answer that question, but I think that what I want to start with is an affirmation of unsolicited by any of us, that what all of us are saying, the common theme is that the connection, the interconnectedness of all of this, that this is all woven, that we are woven as life experiencing itself. And that's the kind of body of work that I think first and foremost I've been working to promote, is that we have to shift the consciousness of separation and isolation. The species isolation, as Robin Wall Kimmerer puts in Braiding Sweetgrass, that we're experiencing, that allows for there then to be the conditions that all of these sort of human systems have been built upon, this illusion of separation. And so for me, the acupuncture point is to go and work with communities, work with, through narrative building, through storytelling, and through movement building around, first we have to come back to this original separation and change the consciousness that then can create the conditions to shift upon which we can have new awareness, and then we can have more capacity building to participate in making the changes needed at a global scale, at very local based solution sets. So a lot of the sort of work that I've been playing with is there's siloization that's occurring in a lot of these organizations and communities and projects. There's so much actually that is the sort of natural uprising of the innate intelligence of the living system working through us, reminding us, reweaving us back into a living system. But there's still so much siloization where these resources exist, where these projects are doing their work. Sometimes they're so disconnected from still reaching and bringing the message at a wide scale. And so a lot of what I'm seeing is the necessity to find the means to broadcast and make these resources and these solutions and these technologies more accessible and more available, so that we can start to shape shift the narrative that somehow we don't have the answers, that the problem is bigger than us to resolve, or that in some way we have to keep the status quo. Even the word sustainability, in terms of looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, a lot of the work we've been looking at is we have to change the narrative to regenerative. It's not enough to sustain the status quo. It's not enough to stay where we are with current production and continued capitalistic way of thinking and operating as a system. We have to make that shift to truly being regenerative. And I think in order to do that, again, it comes back to a deeply personal journey, meeting an interpersonal relational capacity, meeting a community capacity, and a bioregional activity that then, if it happened at a global scale, we'd be able to see the kind of mass movement that is really required for human systems to start realigning ourselves, not only with natural systems, but as natural systems. So I love the field of biomimicry. And I think that taking the field of biomimicry in terms of how we mimic nature and going deeper into bio-reintegration, that the field shift that we're all talking about is it's time to reintegrate with the intelligence of the living system and reactivate our own intelligence and align human systems with natural systems to innovate and iterate right now and prototype these amazing technologies all of you are speaking to. It's so accessible and it's right here, and yet there's still this chasm to be leapt across from where we are now to where we need to be very quickly for there to be a major change occurring in the way that our human activities impact the planet. So I guess my work right now is to be a weaver, trying to bring together those people who've been doing the work as organizations and projects and networks and communities, and weaving us into shared dialogue and conversation so that we can actually lean into our collective intelligence and move away from our siloization and recognize that we are a movement. Blessed Unrest with Paul Hawken, he elucidated the fact that there's this natural movement of the people that's uprising, that's distributed, and yet somehow it's acknowledging the need of solutions that are empowering people of place, right? But it's not yet coordinated. And so I don't think we need one movement coordinated by a central entity. I think it's got to be this changing the landscape of the distributed, adaptive, place-based, place and people of place-based movements, but that find more coordination, camaraderie, commonality, and shared commonsing between us. So a lot of my work is how do we actually weave our organizational systems as ecosystems? What are the natural processes and systems that we can look to now organize our human selves so that we can create more of an ecosystem of mutuality and upliftment and win-win in our scenarios? We have to watch, even in like-minded, aligned people with often a shared vision or mission or hope or goal, we still run into, by default, a bit of a redundancy or maybe a competitiveness or just lack of awareness that we're all out here doing this work. We don't realize it. And so I feel like part of my work has been to take all this beautiful work that you all are doing and saying, how do we weave this into a shared conversation? How do we acknowledge the distinction and celebrate the differences and learn from each other in terms of these different approaches that are culturally relevant to people of place, but now let's broadcast that, distribute it, make it accessible so we can learn with and from each other and really find the things that are the commons between us. And that's what I love about water, is that it's the unifier. It is one thing that is irrevocably, not based just on the division of socioeconomic class or based on, political systems or religious systems or nation states. It is the unifier that is sovereign unto itself. And actually, when we center and put water in the center as the commons amongst us, there's a lot of potential to look at how that unifies us to to put our endeavors into a common goal, a shared stewardship. It's lofty, however, without that deep fundamental shift in humanity, to see ourselves not as a destroyer or consumer or extractor of nature, which is the common narrative thrust upon us through our media and encouraged in our political and industrial systems, because it keeps us part of the capitalistic machine that allows us to continue to just consume and other people profit while there's degradation and oppression. There has to be the storytelling and the narrative shift that says we are co-creators with nature. We actually are innovative and we're inspired and we want our future generations to be able to exist on this planet. And we are not the only ones here. This community is not only human community. We have to shift the narrative to also be ecocentric. We are in a larger community that we simply have excluded from the conversation because they don't share our particular language. And then how does that model into also, a Western privilege mentality, how we aren't sharing the conversation based on language and perception. So increasing the ability that we're having a shared conversation, which centers humans as a symbiotic and beneficial co-creator with the living earth, to take our place up again in the family of things, of ones, of beings that are here on this planet, to kind of reintegrate ourselves as a child of this living earth and a co-creator with it, is essential. Because otherwise we're just going to continue in the same mentality and activity. And we won't make that shift to the fact that we actually have a responsibility and also the ability. We actually have the response-ableness right now to make a shift on the planet. And it takes dropping our egos and dropping our perceptions of our destructive tendencies, and healing and restoring and renewing human as a beneficial, noble species as part of this living system. The indigenous know this. They've held that continuity, that we are in a relationship of reciprocity, and that we have a responsibility as stewards, because we're given everything. We're gifted everything by nature. It's always been available to us as long as we contribute back, and we protect and we care and we preserve and we honor and we revere that, then it's always going to be available. And it's just simply that human forgetting that I think allows then all these other complexities to exist in terms of the system shift needed. So my heart tells me it's as simple as a healing process, an evolutionary rite of passage for humanity to move again towards each other, towards living earth, to take responsibility and to forgive and go through the restoration processes needed to get out of the way of our shamefulness that keep us just locked in a system, and instead celebrate our genius and our inherent ability to contribute, participate, innovate, and change the course of the direction human systems have taken us. There's no, how do I say this last piece? It's like, there's no way that we've reached the end. We're actually at a new beginning. And we have to start telling the story of this as a renewal moment to bring hope again, and the awakened awareness that wants to contribute, a global citizenry aware and capable of contributing to this change upon us.
Thank you very much, Jamaica, to interweaving everything, all the concepts that we are talking today. So I'm curious and thinking in the audience that they are listening to us. You mentioned, and Glenn mentioned, about the illusion of separation. So this is a question for Glenn, that I know that you are very related with Maori wisdom and all the concepts that they are bringing to us. And my question is related about what does it mean that the water is the unifier, and what does it mean this? What does it mean that, and what can water teach to us?
Well, I'm still feeling really blown away by just listening to everybody, and this is the essence of water as unifier. I've been sitting here feeling my whole body starting to tingle with anticipation and with energy, just listening to everybody and feeling that indeed we are at this moment of remembering ourselves. So what's going on in my body there? It's a physical thing that's actually going on. And of course, what is actually going on is that my water body is responding to the very words that hold not only the energy of this movement of humanity, but hold the memory of all previous movements, of all previous actions. And all of the panelists have talked about water memory. And so, you know, this is a real thing. The memory of water, the energy of water cannot be dissipated. It can be forgotten temporarily. And so the process that we're in at the moment is that remembering of our embeddedness within the water community. So for me personally, water is at the core of existence. You know, I kind of like to think of water coming into being, as I mentioned earlier, 1 billion years after the formation of the universe. A conscious universe becoming more and more conscious of itself will spontaneously develop ways of becoming more conscious of itself. And I see water and the evolution of water, the coming into being of water, as one of those pivotal moments of universal consciousness, long before even our planet existed. And the development of our planet, the evolution of our planet, the emergence of this living, beautiful, breathing being that down here in Polynesia we call Papatunuku, or some others call her Gaia, and many other beautiful names. But this coming into existence was the process of this continuing consciousness experiencing itself. And so for me, the water is absolutely central to this, not only for our own particular part of the story, but for the entire story. So water as unifier, in some ways, this is a good way for us to kind of experience ourselves within the story, the water being the unifier, which is absolutely true. But I think even go deeper than that. Water is existence. And so we are drawing from that essential existence. We are drawing our own experience of ourselves and our experience of ourselves within the larger body. So I just loved what Jamaica was saying around this moment of where we find ourselves now. Our dialogue that we're bombarded with is still the one of separation. At the highest levels and at community levels and at individual levels, it's still the story of separation. Now, this separation delusion is starting to break apart. The fact that we're all here now, and everybody who is participating this weekend with the We Are Water prayer, this is living proof that the story of separation is starting to disintegrate. So my message around connecting with the water is that it's inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable that we will connect back with water. How can we not? I mean, we drink. Here's the thing. Why don't we have an idea that every time we take a drink of water, that we actually consciously pay attention to what it feels like to that water being in our mouth. Hold it in our mouth for just a moment, and then feel it going down your throat. Feel it going into your body. Feeling this process as the water cycle. And our participation in it has always been there. We've always been participating. Some of our behaviors have been very much less than helpful, but our essence is a positive participation in the water cycle, in the water of life. I need a drink now.
Beautiful. And I will go deeper about. It's more clear and clear that the water is the unifier, and we have to take care about the water. So I'm very curious, and I will go to we enter deeper in the concept about restructuring the water. So I have a question. I would love to listen, Ethan, about all this amazing knowledge that you have, Ethan, about all the new scientific methods and how we can implement those new technologies in our water ecosystems. And restructure the water.
Absolutely, thank you. Man, this is beautiful. Just listening to everyone real quick, water is the unifier. And one thing that always puzzles my mind is water is not a mineral. It's an element. Okay? It's the most abundant element in our universe. And it's the one element that we are most comprised of. So how do you privatize that? Are we our commodity? So that's a question I think humanity needs to ask itself. Is either are we human commodity? I mean, are we going to start to privatize the sun? Are we going to privatize air? So this is a big thing that I think we also need to realize. And water, is crystal, just like our phones hold information and store energy and memory. Water and the efficiency of water can also be changed. So yes, this is some things we can discuss. With the structure of water, and I'll get into how we applied technologies. We use resonant frequency. We use a multitude of different steps and layers of physics to achieve certain targets. But a resonant frequency is the frequency that an object tends to vibrate. Any element is susceptible to a frequency. It all depends on the size of that element. So, a frequency can be applied to a nanometric pathogen, as well as a pathogen that is already 1 millimeter in size, sometimes larger. It all depends on the bandwidth that we apply. And when applied, the technology makes the pathogen in the water oscillate. That's at its resonant frequency, which causes harm to the membrane and the nucleus of that pathogen. It could be a virus, it can be an element of the water, so forth. So that's a completely new way of applying that we've happened to been utilizing for the past 20 years. And there's a lot of technologies out there that are in use, but it depends on who's going to adopt it and who holds interest. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. We've used these technologies using frequency, inductance, polarity separation. Corinna mentioned earlier ozone, UV, and these are some great applications. And in the end, when you want to look at the surface tension of water, if you break the surface tension of water, then you've also increased the efficiency of membranes, or you can increase the desalination tenfold. So not only are we, and have we been, and is it possible, but through physics, we treat cooling towers without chemicals. We make ice freeze 50% faster. We can, today, we can remove the chemical process from municipal water systems where we don't have to add in heavy metals, run it through 90-degree angles, which distorts and kicks out the structure of water. The natural bond angle of water is 105.4 degrees. And if you change those bond angles of those electron orbits, you can actually have water hold more energy. So what does that mean for the human body? And if we look at let's talk about nature, okay? In a recent article I read on, I believe it was Harvard, they were doing a study on bees, right? And bees have cryptochrome cells behind their ocular lips. They can visibly see the geomagnetic spectrography of our planet. They follow these lines just like birds do, just like a lot of species in the oceans do. So we're all electromagnetically influenced. We all know this. We use, and people use microwaves today and all sorts of other things. We talk on cell phones. So we know that applied physics and frequency have some sort of impact with the biological functions of living species, and also it has to do with the effects of matter. And so we've been using this technology to repair riverways and to skip the whole process of adding tons of unnecessary chemicals and harmful chemicals that we don't even know what it does long term because there's no long-term studies of effects. So, in doing the same thing, you can actually create a non-chemical insecticide. You can make plants grow faster. You can help the natural biological cycle of a living organism when applied correctly, and you can also inhibit its growth when applied correctly. So there's a lot of science that has been proven and that is functional, applied today, that we can utilize to make a difference in this world. And in order to do it, we need our economies to be built on new technologies, not industrial revolution, technologies and coal and everything else like that. We need to remove the regulatory blockades on new technologies, whether it's the government entities that are inhibiting new companies coming in, or technologies that will benefit humanity, because it's all in research. You have to invest in new technology, not keep investing in the old ways. And so, the whole future of energy is going to be cobalt and nickel and palladium and hydrogen and PEM cells and things like that. It's not going to be back in the other direction where we're pumping out the one thing that helps keep the planet cool, oil. So as we look at all this and we look at the applied science of resonant frequency, whether we talk about the biological functions of the environment, human health, of purifying water, it's when we realize that all of nature is entwined, and it's the resonant frequency that is the communicative language of nature and human beings. I think at that very point in humanity, that's when humanity will become stewards of nature as we're supposed to be on this planet.
Thank you very much, Ethan, for this very clear explanation, and how my next question is what's coming to me is how we can arrive to our brothers and sisters. I always love to put this example. No, it's coming back to the city where I grew up. I born here. I grew up here, and how we could bring this wisdom and all this knowledge to the people from our neighborhoods. The question is how engage all the people to restore and protect our water resources. So maybe this is a question for Karuna, if he feels to answer this question, because he is interweaving between indigenous communities and they know how to take care, and he's also coming from Western society. So yeah, that's my question. What do you think?
Okay, thank you, Javier. And wow, yeah, I'm really blown away also and feel very inspired here. I think right away, one of the best ways is to start the conversations like our panel is, just from hearing everyone speak here, it gives me a lot of hope. We all know that there's a lot of different actions that are needed, but when you start to have the conversations of how to put things together, it naturally engages people to feel not like a pessimistic hope. Like I was reading by 2025, the United Nations was going to saying that water is going to be the biggest, scarcest element, and there could be X amount of Z amount of wars around it. But if we start going into that thinking, it's right away a scarcity mentality, and you're right away thinking about what's the problems and what's, it's a separatist mentality. So again, it comes back to a lot of it to education, I feel. And, fortunately for all of us, I think there's big waves happening on this planet that are both naturally waking people up, and events around people are starting to say, wait a minute, what's really important here? What's really important? Well, I still would really love to go in nature and jump in this spring around me and make sure that I have pure drinking water, And I love what Glenn mentioned also, because the other if there was one single thing that I could do that I think that would shake people up, I would probably have the whole world at one time join in like an ayahuasca ceremony or a peyote ceremony, indigenous type ceremony. Because when I first prayed in this kind of ceremony, that is where personally I really woke up to how I'm connected with these elements and these spirits and these plants and everything like that. And people might have obviously different ways. It can be through meditation, it can be through other things like this. And in terms of getting people engaged from different communities that might not, you know, lean towards, they might be bombarded by mainstream media, let's say, or things like this. But I think we start to engage the community in fun ways, and also use our resources as communities of people that care about the resources to say, okay, now we can bring people together for a beautiful community event where we can have music honoring the water. We can have indigenous people honoring the water here. We can have songs about the earth. There's lots of amazing musicians that are out there that love to sing about water and pray about water and things like this. So I think as we also realize our connection to water, we'll naturally want to protect it more. For me, I have one 3-year-old son who's now in Miami, Florida. And, you know, I'm always thinking about him and how I want the future generations to have clean water access, you know? So start to engage thinking about how are the children going to come in and what are we going to leave them to have in there. So I think it's up to all of us to be stewards, especially those that are out in the communities. And so, you know, I spoke about ceremony. Well, amazing thing is happening. A lot of the indigenous are coming forward. And I really like to think the plant medicines and the water itself is coming forward and calling people into us again and saying, hey, you know what, world, all this is out there, but what is again within? And we all know that the microcosm is the microcosm. So if we also start to take care of the water within ourselves, you know, like I learned from the ceremony to do what was mentioned and take the water in the morning, you know, either make a small intention, say a blessing, a prayer for it, drink the water, and start to heal ourselves from it, start to take away the toxicity in our lives and behind that. And I think when you share with people how, you know, being in an optimal state of frequency and vibration, it always starts with the water. If you're drinking acidic water at a pH level of 5 that, you know, has been put, or chemicals in it, and it's been, you know, polluted, you're gonna feel it in your being. It's gonna affect you in a lot of ways. And you know, if we're drinking more restructured, charged water that has been given gratitude, given love, it's going to affect us in more positive ways. It's going to make us more resistant to things that would damage our immune system, you know? So overall, I would say that I think the best way possible is to learn from each other, to keep sharing on platforms such as this, to keep spreading the message, and to be able to you know, engage worldwide in this, and locally, start with local, and, you know, as we go from there, create events and reach a larger number of people. Like I said, I think the earth consciousness is calling people now forward that have this drive to share there. So I really feel like our regenerative mission has started already, and I think it's just going to gain momentum and gain there. And so that we really do come into that true connection that, you know, we are one with the water within ourselves, we're one with others, it is the unifier, and it's up to all of us to start taking these steps to make that knowledge available to everyone so they can take the steps in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Karuna. Thank you very much. And we are almost concluding the panel. Maybe we have more 5 minutes, around 5 minutes. Between 5 minutes and 10 minutes. So I'm curious about what could be the first steps to start to design regenerative cultures. So maybe Jamaica could answer this question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question I care a lot about. I think first and foremost, I have this desire to say, first, it starts with the individual reconnecting ourselves as people of place. And that means get in the water, commune with the water. As I love how you shared, Glenn, you know, actually be with the water as we drink it, like it's that relationship first and foremost. With all living systems, I think that in itself, it creates something out there and brings it right home to our relationship with life. And so I think even just that sort of orientation for people, that then as we start to do that as communities, as we start to create opportunity for surface area for communities to have that kind of experience of communion and connection and stewardship and participation, then I think, again, that bioregional access point is I think where we have most impact done at a global scale, at a coordinated global scale, impacting people of place, because every place and every people's has a very different way that culture, a regenerative culture, would be applied. So that's one thing. And I think I actually just want to read from an article. I hate to do that on a panel, but I think it's worth it just to say, here's one definition we've offered for regenerative cultures that I had written. And it's that one definition of regenerative cultures are cultures that promote the ongoing renewal and restoration of natural resources, consider the wide scale and long-term implications of practices and systems on human and non-human communities, promotes justice, equitability, compassion, and cooperation in order to create the conditions for more resilience, diversity, and thrivability for all. And going further, regenerative cultures are ones that celebrate the unique relationships of people in place, honoring the influence and impact on each other. And regenerative cultures recognize there's many cultures, with an S, many cultures, and honor that diversity and the expression of each culture and the different needs of each culture, the different unique wisdoms of each culture. Regenerative cultures bridge the intergenerational gap, looking to the past and to the elders and to the older cultures for wisdom, but also opening the way for the future and for our youth and for innovation to inspire our progress forward. Regenerative cultures are inherently reciprocal, creating win-wins and looking to uplift all, not just some, for the sake of creating the remote possibility of peace and prosperity to truly exist. And regenerative cultures reward ingenuity, inclusivity, generosity, and collective intelligence, knowing that we're stronger together than we ever could be separate. So I think some key components have to do with remembering that reciprocity, and first and foremost, we have to restore the relationships of people in place. And again, be woven into the fabric of a place as a people, connected and belonging to each other and to the earth again. I think that one of the things I'm realizing, and it just sort of dawned on me, I guess maybe it seems so obvious, is that there's two motivators for why we would change action, for what drives our action, what would drive our change. And those are fear and love. And fear is a motivator, and it will guide you to do things. Fear will get you activated to try to make a change because you're terrified, you're afraid, right? But it's finite. And fear will bring you to a place of apathy and hopelessness and despair and exhaustion, because it's a finite source of our motivation for why we do what we do and why we would make change, right? But love is an infinite resource. Love will draw you and compel you to participate, to engage, to drive, to be enduring in a way that we need right now. We need actually to have this movement come from a force of love, from the force of nature, force of love that motivates us, that this isn't just about what we're afraid will happen if we don't make the changes necessary in terms of ecological and societal and even economic collapse. We have to change the narrative to our motivation is because we love the future generations, because we love the diversity and abundance of this planet, because we love the inventive ingenuity of humanity, because we love ourselves. Because I actually believe the earth will continue to do it's regenerative by nature. Its design is regenerative. Inherently, we are regenerative. So it's sort of like the regeneration will happen with or without us, but how we experience that change of how the earth is going to regenerate, it's going to decompose what is no longer serving in order to be fuel that then is composted into a new creation. We have, I think it's like, if we bring it home to it's not like only save the planet, it's like, it's like ensure the continuation of the human experience on the planet in right relationship with all these other species that we are woven into and have a responsibility and a relationship with. So I just really love bringing that relationships of reciprocity, that is where regenerative cultures will come from, is starting from a place of celebrating what we love, being motivated by deep care and compassion and commitment to make the changes necessary that may be uncomfortable, but it's sort of like, it's going to get uncomfortable one way or another. And if we get on board with the transition happening and we get on board with the changes necessary and let go of comforts that we've sort of, been privileged to, that have been on the backs of these elements, these natural systems, these other species and on the backs of people who've been oppressed and extracted from. We have to start recreating a wheel that serves and creates equitability for all life. And that may be uncomfortable to have to make the changes necessary. And yet I believe that if we mature enough as a species to realize that those changes will actually liberate us, liberate all life, you know, we can get on board with the transition happening and experience this as a great revelation, like just this joyful, like the veil being lifted can be terrifying or it can be exquisite. And so I think we have to, and you all, some of the beautiful solutions that you've shared, I'm just like, oh my gosh, if more humans understood this was all possible and it's all right here, wouldn't that inspire us that it doesn't have to be so scary and dangerous to make the transitions necessary? We can start doing what we can with what we have, with where we are in our own life, the simple acts that bring this large, giant, complex conversation into the simple acts we can do to realign ourselves with nature, create relationships of reciprocity, look to our behaviors and make sure that we're minimizing our impact and minimizing our extraction. And then how can we start to contribute and participate from a place of great love in the change that's occurring? How can we get on board with, in our communities, being advocates and stewards? If that kind of movement of the people uprising from the bottom up met this systems change that I think situations like COVID and the civil unrest are forcing upon our top-down systems, I think that we'd find ourselves right at that crux point where things we didn't think were possible before, or we never even realized could happen, become visible. The invisible becomes visible and accessible, and we actually get to become agents of helping that change to occur and bringing more of us along on the journey of this rite of passage humanity is going through right now. So I think maybe I've taken my time, but certainly there's more, and I'm happy to share more resources of how do you actually grow regenerative cultures, how do you retrofit, rebuild, reimagine regenerative cultures, and then start the very simple acts that humans at all scales can start to take that are meaningful and engaging to sort of add to the drops of the bucket that start to overflow the cup into this more large-scale regenerative cultural transformation.
So what else can I say after these brilliant words from all of you? And that's, we are arriving to the end of this panel. And we feel that we are planting a seed for more to open this dialogue in the near future. And I feel that this panel was brilliant. I feel that we complement each other really well, that we have been interweaving the world really beautiful, coming and reminding the consciousness of unity. And then as soon as we will remind the consciousness of unity that we are the same than nature, and we are nature, and nature is us, we can start to live in reciprocity with our Mother Earth, and then start to think and live the question about how we could design regenerative cultures. So leaving the question, and thank you very much. I hope you see you in the near programs, in the future programs of Tribute Earth. So thank you very much for being part of We Are Water, We Are One. And I'm so grateful. If anyone wants to share a few words, you are very welcome. If not, we can conclude here.
Just gratitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's been a beautiful share. I really enjoyed hearing and sharing from the energy. I feel very inspired and look forward to our amazing panel. And maybe we can start at some point, either a group combo or something, how we can keep things moving forward.
Absolutely. speaking with all you guys, so exciting to hear the difference in the background and where everyone's at and their feelings on where the world is at and how the ocean is speaking to us and how everything is you know, nothing is ever a mistake. It's all within the greater design. And as we're learning all this, we learn it in time. And now's the time. So it's an honor to be with all of you here and speaking with you. And I look forward to making a better world for the future generations to come. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have a Maori saying, ko tato te wai, ko te wai ko tato, which is we are the water is us. And that pretty much sums it up, really. And gosh, how fantastic to spend this time with you guys and feel so inspired. And you know, we're all together doing this fantastic work. Aren't we lucky?
So we're concluding. We close the recording, Carolina.
Thank you for joining us for Tribute Earth. My name is Scarlett de la Torre. It's so wonderful to be here with you all singing the songs of the ocean. Sending you all so much love. Mwah. Thank you, Catalina, for having me. I love you so much. And thank you for all the beautiful work that you're doing in the world. Aho!
Are you ready to see the invisible? We know everything is energy, vibrating with resonance. Nature has an order. With energy she creates the earth, mountains, water, and all the creatures we know. We are all connected by invisible force. But what stops us perceiving this fact? We are born with the ability to perceive resonance. Innocence is lost as we are taught the way by those who have forgotten sensory and perceptive skills. They give you a name, and you believe it. You identify with it and stop perceiving the vibrations surrounding you. You are taken to school and forced to believe ideas that fragment and label everything. Species, races, sets and subsets don't describe anything real. Civilization tells you how things work. Rules, laws, and even that you only have 5 senses. What about the sense of balance, or telepathy? They divide Earth with countries and invented borders, imposing hierarchy and social status. You swallow a big film called religion. Of course, yours is the best. So now you see yourself separated from all the creatures in the world, separated by possessions, status, or colours, by invented countries or fragmented beliefs. Once our heads are full of ideas that do not describe anything tangible, we walk around confused by domesticated perception. Where is our perception when we stumble or have an accident? Where is our attention while we swim and guard it and keep producing things designed to break quickly and pollute our environment? What disability allows greed to poison the water we all drink? What are we thinking, creating deserts to produce food out of corpses? How disconnected from life are we to allow ourselves to kill each other? It's internal confusion that makes us destroy our environment because we do not perceive it. It seems we've lost common sense and life values. Even Earth is not happy. Luckily, some still move and live differently. Those aware of vibrational changes in their body make decisions by perceiving situations that resonate. When we are not confused by believing in things that don't exist, we act practically in order with reality. The love of these creatures softens the crust in the hearts of others, freeing them from domestication. They share the ability to free the rest with presence, sensitivity, and tenderness. We all share a great mission. Life needs us to awaken, and together is the only way. Life needs you. Let's combine our powers to design solutions for present moments and recover forgotten innate abilities.